The night was quiet, but beneath that silence something was shifting, something the world hadn't prepared for. In the dim glow of radar screens and intelligence reports, there were murmurs, subtle anomalies, a whisper of capability that wasn't supposed to exist. At first it was dismissed, a fluke, a misreading, but the whispers grew louder, and then the shock came, a weapon, fired with precision, technology, thought beyond their reach. Iran had done the unthinkable. What was supposed to be impossible, or at the very least improbable, had become reality. In that moment, it wasn't just military analysts who were stunned. It was an entire system of assumptions that crumbled. This story isn't about geopolitics. It's not about warheads or drones. It's about something deeper. The fire that burns in those who are told they can't. The hunger in the belly of the underestimated. For years, Iran had lived under some of the harshest sanctions the modern world had known. Entire industries were throttled, banks cut off, scientists isolated. The intention was clear: slow them down, choke their progress, break their will. But pressure, when applied to the wrong kind of people, doesn't create surrender. It creates brilliance. It's the same in life. Every person at some point finds themselves under pressure. Maybe it's financial collapse. Maybe it's family that doesn't believe in you. Maybe it's a job that undervalues you, a community that judges you, a world that dismisses you before you even begin. In those moments, you feel like you're surrounded. Like there's no oxygen left in the room. That's what Iran faced. The kind of isolation that would crush most nations. But instead of waiting for the world to open its doors again, they started building doors of their own. They took what little they had and turned it into a forge. You see, desperation has a hidden gift. When there's nowhere left to run, you learn to stand and fight. When resources are scarce, you innovate. When the world stops supplying, you learn how to supply yourself. That's what happened inside Iran's research labs and underground bunkers. Behind every piece of advanced weaponry was a decision not to give up. Behind every breakthrough was a scientist who had to learn 1,000 times what others were taught once. Behind every missile was a mindset: we will not be broken. Translate that to your life. Think about the times you've been boxed in, told to stay in your place. Maybe your background didn't prepare you. Maybe your environment wasn't supportive. Maybe your opportunities were locked behind gates you didn't have keys to. But pressure, remember, doesn't only destroy, it also distills. It boils you down to your essence, and if there's fire inside you, pressure just brings it closer to the surface. Iran's example is a metaphor for a kind of strength that few are ever forced to find, but everyone possesses. The strength to grow in the dark, the strength to believe in yourself when the world turns its back. It's not loud, it's not glamorous. It's the strength that wakes up early when there's no applause. The kind that studies harder, works longer, and keeps going without recognition. That's what it takes to reach the level where even giants pause and say, wait. How did they do that? Because here's the truth the world doesn't want to admit. The underdog has an advantage. When nobody expects greatness from you, you are free to build it without interference. While others are busy underestimating you, you have time to develop. That's the power of obscurity. It protects you until you're ready to emerge. Iran wasn't on the front page every day, but beneath that quiet surface, a transformation was underway. And when it surfaced, it didn't ask for permission. So what do you do when life puts a ceiling above you? You dig underground, you go deeper, you find places no one else is willing to go. You learn skills people overlook, you build with whatever scraps you can find, and in that process you develop not only tools, but identity, purpose, mastery. That's why when Iran shocked the world, it wasn't just about a missile. It was about years of effort, persistence, failure, adaptation, resilience, and ultimately silent success. The world we live in tends to measure people by their circumstances. What school you went to, what city you live in, what job title you have, but real power isn't granted by circumstance, it's revealed by resistance, and there's no better teacher than a closed door. If everything had come easy for Iran, would they have pushed themselves so far? If you never faced difficulty, would you ever know how powerful you really are? People often wait for ideal conditions before they begin. The perfect job, the right timing, enough money, full support. But the truth is, that day may never come. You have to begin where you are. Start with what's available. Use what's in your hands. That's what innovation really is. It's not about shiny tools, it's about making magic with what's around you. Iran didn't invent in luxury. They invented in lack. And that should be the most motivational lesson of all. Greatness is possible, even in the shadows. No matter how many sanctions were placed, how many resources were blocked, or how much the world tried to slow them down, they found a way forward, not out of comfort, not because they had a choice, but because they made a decision: survive, adapt, evolve. You are capable of the same thing. No matter what's standing in your way right now, there's a way through. Maybe not the obvious way, maybe not the easy one, but it exists, and you will find it, not because the path clears, but because you clear it. There will come a day when the people who overlooked you, doubted you, or dismissed you will be forced to reckon with your results. They'll wonder how you got so far, and you'll know. It was the pressure. It was the rejection. It was the adversity. Those weren't your enemies. They were your greatest assets. They didn't stop you. They revealed you. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you're behind. Just keep building, keep forging, because when your moment comes, it won't just surprise them. It will silence them. They had no choice. When every bridge is burned behind you and the world offers no hand, the only direction left is inward. That's when something ancient awakens, something deeper than hope, something more dangerous than despair. It is belief raw and unfiltered. Not belief in systems, not belief in saviors, but belief in the self. In the mirror, in the bloodline, Iran didn't become self-reliant because it wanted to. It became self-reliant because it had to. And in that crucible of necessity, something extraordinary was forged. Not just missiles or defense systems, but a mindset that says, we are enough. In the absence of global trade, they built their own supply chains. When foreign experts walked out, their own minds stepped up. When technology was locked away behind embargoes, they reverse, engineered, innovated, and adapted. And slowly the world began to realize something unsettling. They're doing it. They're not waiting anymore. They're building anyway. That revelation didn't just challenge military strategy. It shattered a psychological dependency. Because the deepest fear of those in power isn't that someone else gets stronger. It's that someone else no longer needs them. That's the fire inside anyone who's been abandoned, anyone who's been left to fend for themselves. At first, it feels like betrayal, like the ground's been ripped from under your feet. But if you don't give up, if you keep going, you find something waiting in the rubble, your own strength. Iran found its own power because it was denied access to everyone else's. In that loneliness, a new kind of confidence was born. The kind that doesn't ask, doesn't beg, doesn't apologize. The kind that says, if no one will build with us, then we will build alone. There is something deeply human in this evolution. Think of a child who is never praised, never lifted, never handed opportunity. That child either breaks, or they become a force the world cannot contain. They learn to clap for themselves, to rise without a spotlight, to keep pushing, not for validation, but because stopping is no longer an option. That's what happens when belief detaches from external permission and roots itself within. When your reason to move forward isn't someone else's approval, but your own unshakable drive. Iran's development wasn't just technical, it was spiritual. To decide you are capable without needing anyone to confirm it, that is a revolutionary act. To say, we don't care if the world doubts us, we don't even care if they fear us. We care that we are capable of rising by our own hand, is an act of defiance far greater than rhetoric. It's the same defiance that lives in the artist who paints alone, the entrepreneur who starts with nothing, the student who teaches themselves, the dreamer who builds quietly while the world laughs. Most people never unlock their potential because they're waiting for permission, waiting for conditions to be ideal, waiting for someone to say you're ready. But readiness is not given, it's chosen. You decide you are enough, you decide you are qualified, you decide the tools you have are sufficient to start. That's what Iran did. They looked at what they had, not what they lacked, and said, this will be enough to begin. And once they began, momentum carried them forward. Progress is like that. You don't need to know every step. You just need the courage to take the first one. That's what self-reliance demands. Courage, not certainty. Faith, not proof. Because at first, nothing works. Everything feels clumsy. Failure is constant. But over time, skill forms, confidence grows, and eventually results appear. Then, what was once unimaginable becomes the new standard. Iran's defense systems were mocked at first, dismissed, laughed at, but they didn't stop. And now, the same voices that once sneered are studying their methods, recalibrating their models, and trying to understand how it all happened under their radar. That is the power of belief. It transforms ridicule into recognition. It turns isolation into incubation. But the greatest benefit isn't the result. It's the transformation within. When you build alone, you come to understand that your value was never dependent on who acknowledged it. You realize you don't need the crowd. That's when your power becomes untouchable. Not because you are invincible, but because you are independent. You know your capability is real, because you built it in silence. And there's a strange kind of peace that comes from self-reliance, not arrogance, not pride, just a quiet understanding, I can handle this. That peace can't be bought, it can't be gifted. It must be earned moment by moment, in solitude, in difficulty, in decision. That's where real confidence comes from. Not from applause, but from action. Not from being seen, but from doing what must be done even when no one sees. Iran's journey is a brutal reminder that strength is often born in hardship. When options are removed, creativity blooms. When allies disappear, inner leaders rise. The message is clear. If they can, so can you. If they can rise with their backs against the wall, so can you. If they can master systems under pressure, so can you master your life under fire. Their story isn't just national. It's deeply personal, because we all at some point will face a season of abandonment, of being on our own. The question is, will we wait for the world to return, or will we rise without it? You don't need their help to begin. You don't need their belief to succeed. The most dangerous person in any room is the one who has nothing, but builds anyway. Because once you learn to generate power from within, the external world becomes optional. You are not controlled by it anymore. That's what self-reliance gives you, freedom, not from hardship, but from needing the world's validation to move forward. Iran's progress didn't come with celebration. It came with resistance, silence, solitude, but still, they advanced, and that should inspire anyone who's ever felt alone on their journey, anyone who's had to be their own support system, their own motivator, their own team. You don't have to be part of the powerful to become powerful. You just have to start, to try, to fail, to learn, to build, and when your moment comes, when the world finally turns to see what you've created, it won't matter whether they believe in you or not. You'll already have become what they said you couldn't be, not because they allowed it, but because you did. There is a particular silence that comes just before shock, a quiet disbelief that ripples through minds as assumptions fall apart. In war rooms and strategy centers, in media briefings and intelligence dossiers, the realization began to spread. They had been wrong. The underdog they underestimated had crossed a line they didn't expect. There, in the open skies or buried deep in classified corridors, technology emerged that wasn't supposed to exist. Precision, range, power, capabilities that weren't just competitive, they were surprising. For a moment, even the most seasoned analysts had to pause. How did they do this? And more importantly, when? This wasn't just a failure of intelligence. It was a failure of imagination. The belief that power only comes from certain places, that greatness wears certain flags, that innovation only flourishes in approved economies. When someone smaller, weaker, or dismissed rises beyond expectation, it causes more than alarm, it creates cognitive dissonance. It forces people to revisit all the quiet prejudices they held. That kind of disruption is not just military, it's spiritual, it tears through narratives, it humbles arrogance. Being underestimated is one of the most powerful positions a person or a nation can be in. When no one expects you to succeed, they're not watching you. When they're not watching, you get to grow in peace. There's no pressure to perform, no spotlight demanding explanation. You're left alone, ignored, forgotten. And that, paradoxically, becomes your advantage. While the powerful grow complacent under the weight of their own reputation, you are free to build without comparison, to fail without headlines, to refine without interference. Iran's rise in technological capability did not happen overnight. It was years in the making, painful years, years of ridicule, embargoes, cyber attacks, and sabotage. But those years built something more resilient than steel. They built a mindset that does not wait for validation. They built a doctrine that does not beg for inclusion. They taught themselves that being counted out is not a curse. It is an invitation. When the giants turn their gaze elsewhere, the underdog sharpens their tools. Alone, quietly, until one day they are ready. And by the time the world notices, it's too late to stop it. Every person knows this feeling. The feeling of being overlooked, of being seen but not respected. Maybe it happened at school, where your effort wasn't acknowledged. Maybe it happened at work, where your ideas were dismissed. Maybe in your own family, your ambition was seen as fantasy. That sting is universal. But it can either corrode you, or it can become your fuel. The question is not whether you've been underestimated. The question is what you do with that fact. The smartest thing the underestimated ever do is stay quiet. Let them laugh. Let them assume. Use their doubt as camouflage. The real work happens behind the curtain. The real growth comes when nobody is clapping. In those moments, you learn the truth. Applause doesn't build mastery. Pressure does, doubt does. Being doubted teaches you to rely on effort over ego. Being overlooked teaches you to focus on output, not approval. That's why when your time finally comes, it's explosive. Unexpected, unstoppable, not because you are louder, but because you are undeniable. Iran didn't wake up one day and shock the world out of luck. It was the result of relentless work, hidden from headlines, disciplined in its silence. It's the same for anyone who wants to achieve something remarkable. You don't prepare for your moment when the lights are already on. You prepare for it when no one's looking. There is a quiet violence to this kind of preparation. Because it demands the death of comfort. No one is pushing you. No one is encouraging you. You are entirely responsible for your progress. That kind of burden can break most people. But for those who carry it, something happens. They transform. They become builders, warriors, architects of their own future. Not driven by recognition, but by necessity. Not fueled by praise, but by principle. The world only pays attention to outcomes. They don't see the 1,000 days of work that preceded the success. They don't care about your long nights, your rejected proposals, your silent sacrifices. They only care once you've made it. And by then, the shock has already set in. That's what makes the surprise so effective. While others were busy talking, you were building. While they were bragging, you were learning. And now that the results are real, they scramble to catch up. But you've already moved on to the next phase. That's the essence of rising in the shadows, not for show, not for revenge, simply because there is no other way. You don't need to announce your plans. You don't need to justify your ambition. Let your results speak for themselves. When the world finally notices, you won't need to say a word. Their silence will be your confirmation. Their shock will be your reward. This is the lesson every underdog must learn. You don't need to be believed in. You just need to believe in yourself. Their doubt is irrelevant. Your discipline is what matters. Your ability to keep going when no one sees the point asterisk asterisk. That asterisk asterisk is your true strength. Because when you build in silence, when you rise in obscurity, your success becomes unexplainable to those who never thought you had it in you. And that's the real power, not just to succeed, but to succeed in such a way that the world has no framework for it. They can't figure out how you did it because they never even considered you were capable. That's not just victory, that's transformation, that's turning doubt into data, that's converting neglect into narrative. Your story becomes undeniable, your presence becomes unignorable. What Iran demonstrated isn't just geopolitical relevance, it's a universal human truth. If you use your seasons of being overlooked to train, refine, and evolve, There will come a time when the very people who wrote you off will have to rewrite everything they thought they knew. The same principle applies to you. No matter how invisible you feel now, your time is coming. And when it comes, it won't just be noticed. It will be felt. But for that to happen, you have to embrace the shadows. You have to understand the power of being underestimated. Stop chasing validation. Stop trying to prove your worth to people who aren't listening. Prove it to yourself. Earn your own respect first. Build your skill set in silence. Stack your wins no matter how small. Every effort you make, even the ones no one sees, is a step closer to the day when they won't be able to ignore you. And when that day comes, you won't need to say, "I told you so." You'll be too busy building the next thing. Because greatness doesn't pause for praise. It doesn't beg for attention. It simply continues. That's how you surprise the giants, not by being louder, but by being better, quietly, relentlessly, completely. The sound of disbelief doesn't come with explosions or alarms. It settles like a fog, thick and suffocating, in the rooms of those who thought they had everything under control. Somewhere, someone stares at a monitor. Numbers don't lie. Footage doesn't lie. Something impossible just happened, and the system that built its dominance on predictability finds itself unable to respond. What do you do when the rules of the game have changed? What do you do when the one you considered inferior starts playing better than you? You recalculate. You panic. You begin to realize the comfort you mistook for security was just stagnation in disguise. That's what true disruption does. It doesn't just catch you off guard. It exposes the fact that you were never really ready. Iran's sudden leap into military and technological relevance wasn't just a shock, it was a statement. One that echoed far beyond radar signatures or missile trajectories. It said, "We are not who you thought we were. We are something else now." And with that, decades of assumptions collapsed. It was no longer a question of whether they could catch up. It became a matter of how long they had already been ahead without anyone noticing. That kind of realization hits deep, not just strategically but philosophically, because it forces everyone to confront a possibility they were never trained to consider. Maybe power isn't where you thought it was. Maybe progress isn't about how loud you are, but how deeply you can build in silence. There's something dangerous about people who have nothing to lose. There's something even more dangerous about people who once had nothing and learned how to turn that into strength. Iran's journey didn't start in laboratories or launch sites. It started with humiliation, with isolation, with the world saying, "You can't." And somewhere in that darkness, a decision was made, not to beg for acceptance, but to become undeniable. And they did it without permission. That's the kind of energy that no superpower wants to admit exists. Because if one country can rise under pressure, others can too. And then the illusion of control begins to fracture. This isn't about sides. It's not about who's right or wrong. It's about human capacity. What people are capable of when they are forced to survive on ingenuity alone. When they stop waiting for doors to open and start building structures from scratch. That's what makes these moments in history so powerful. They remind the world that innovation doesn't belong to the privileged. It belongs to the hungry, the desperate, the obsessed. Those who are too stubborn to quit and too focused to care what others think. That mindset, fueled by rejection and refined by discipline, is what leads to breakthroughs the world can't anticipate. You don't need to be a nation to understand this. It lives in every person who's ever felt written off. It lives in the student who was told they'd never make it, the artist who was laughed at, the builder who couldn't get funding, the athlete who got benched, the mother who was left alone, the dreamer who was told to be realistic. These are the ones who carry a spark that can become a blaze, not in public, not with applause, but in quiet hours, in small decisions, in refusal after refusal, still choosing to believe, choosing to try. What Iran did on a global scale, you can do on a personal one. Take what you have, no matter how little, and begin. Use rejection as fuel. Use failure as information. Understand that silence isn't absence, it's preparation. Every ignored effort is a seed planted in ground the world isn't watching. And when it grows, the world won't understand how it happened. But you will, because you were there for every moment. You were there when you kept going without evidence. You were there when you built in the dark. You were there when no one said your name. That's the beauty of transformation. It doesn't wait for cameras. It doesn't ask for permission. It just happens. Quietly at first, then all at once. Iran's rise wasn't just a story of science and strategy. It was a story of self-belief, of choosing to evolve instead of surrender, of deciding that limits are only real if you accept them. That same choice lives in every person, to stop measuring your value by other people's expectations, to stop needing validation to take action, to stop thinking that circumstances define your destiny. They don't, only your response does. Everyone faces pressure, everyone encounters walls, but what separates those who rise from those who fall is one thing: commitment, not talent, not luck, just raw, unwavering, exhausting commitment. To growth, to movement, to trying again, and again, and again, until the impossible starts to become real, until the people who dismissed you now study your every move, not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. Because they realized too late that what they thought was weakness was actually resilience in disguise. By the time the world realized Iran had changed, it wasn't just about weapons. It was about the signal it sent. A warning to anyone who thinks they can define someone else's limits. A message to anyone who thinks control lasts forever. And an inspiration to anyone who's ever been told to stay small. You don't have to announce your growth. You don't have to prove your value to those who refuse to see it. You just keep building, keep rising, keep preparing, because the day will come when your silence turns into shock. And when that moment comes, you won't need to say anything. Your results will say it all. This kind of story isn't about glorifying conflict. It's about recognizing power, real power. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that earns it. Not the kind that dominates through fear, but the kind that earns respect through persistence. The kind that comes from years of being doubted, dismissed, and denied, and choosing, every single day, to rise anyway. That's the kind of power that can't be sanctioned. It can't be bullied. It can't be stopped. Because it lives deeper than politics. It lives in will. And if there's one truth to carry forward from this chapter, it's this: no one gets to define your limits but you. Not your history, not your pain, not your surroundings, only you. If you decide to grow, nothing can stop you. If you commit to excellence, no doubt can hold you back. If you build brick by brick in silence, there will come a day when the world has no choice but to acknowledge what you've done. Not out of charity, but out of shock, out of awe, out of undeniable, irreversible respect. That day may feel far away now, but it's coming. If you stay the course, it's coming. And when it arrives, you will not need to explain how you got there. You'll simply stand there quietly, as the world realizes it was wrong about you all along.